So tonight for our summer prep, this round or this evening, I want to talk a little bit about, if I had to title this, I would title this, Is It Yours? I write about this every so often when I talk about emotions. And recently I was reminded of asking really pointed questions when it comes to emotional health and what you're feeling, whether it's good, bad, or indifferent. In a little addition to that is I'll touch a little bit on quantum entanglement. I'm sure you guys all saw my post. This is, I guess, a few weeks back about how to unravel when you have maybe engaged with somebody online. But what I don't think that we talk about enough or even really understand is how this can affect your whole life. Quantum entanglement can actually begin as a child, and I'm pretty sure, I mean, I haven't studied it enough, but I'm pretty sure it can do at birth. It's one of those topics that is deep and then it's not, but it is. And so I don't think we really discuss it much. So as we chat tonight, I'll be sharing this with you, and I'm hoping you guys have some questions or even maybe some findings. My hope is that this is more interactive. If not, no worries. But just so you know that that's on the table. For those of you watching later, you get a bird's eye view into what we all discuss here. So asking, is it yours? Whenever you have any negative feeling, it's really important to ask, is this mine? And what I mean by that is so many times we can have a negative emotion and it's not ours. But we assume, well, I'll speak for myself. I don't want to say you guys do, because maybe all of you are like, okay, no, that's not me. I do this, and I watch my children do this, where we start to have a feeling, maybe a low feeling, and we just assume, well, this must be something about me. Is there something going on? If you've ever had that impending doom feel, just anything like that, I rarely took the time to say, is this mine? So the very first thing I'd love for you guys to do is just to make a note somewhere, somehow, asking yourself, whenever I'm feeling anything negative, you wake up on the wrong side of the bed, you are doing your work, or you're exercising, or you're just driving down the road, and all of a sudden you have this wash of low feeling, ask the question, is it mine? For those of us, and I'm pretty sure it's everybody here and everybody watching that's had a rough event, a traumatic event, right? Remember, just pause on that. In my classes, we don't qualify trauma. We don't get the luxury of doing that. Your body qualifies it. My hard is my hard, but it doesn't mean that yours is any less. And it also doesn't mean that yours is any more hard. It just is. So just as a reminder, your heart is yours, mine is mine. And if there's if there's an event, maybe you don't need to ask if it's my feeling, you might know. However, I want to share a story with you all that might give you some insight into, even when you've had a traumatic event or a situation or season, many times a negative emotion may not even be yours. I was at an event, well, it was in August. It was about 2 weeks after my husband had passed last year. And I'd already had, I think I'd already gotten the tickets to go. Some part of my summer last year is a bit of a blur. My mom and I went, and I thought, I just need to get out of the house. I want to feel normal. I don't know if you guys have ever gone through a traumatic event. You're like, I just need to feel normal. Maybe it was just covering it up. I don't even know. It doesn't even matter, but I just wanted to feel normal. So my mom's like, that's fine. Let's go. We'll just listen to corporate talk, and it'll just be a really fun event. And then it wasn't. And here's why. I wasn't crying when I went because I wanted to have a fun time. So I wasn't even thinking about my husband or my situation. I was thinking about Young Living and just immersing myself in that for an afternoon. But when I saw people who hadn't seen me, they started inappropriately sobbing. It was weird. I thought, wow, you guys need to come to my class and learn how to deal with other people's emotions. It was super odd. And so I was fine until they weren't. And then I wasn't fine. if that makes sense. And it really put a huge damper on my afternoon because I didn't know how to differentiate between their emotional challenges and my own. Of course, my husband had just passed, and so I'm going to be sad. But there are moments, and you guys all know this with grief. Every one of us has walked through grief at some point. You all know there's just some days where you're actually doing okay. So you put mascara on that day, right? It's a good day. So yes, Lisa, you have to cope with their feelings. What's interesting, and sometimes I say I'm a little bit of a slow learner, because this exact same thing happened to me when my son Zion got cancer. I'll never, and it's one of those things that I think I probably should use some sort of release, because I remember it like it was yesterday, really, almost like it just happened today, because I can still feel how hot it was standing out in front of my front porch. You guys know September in Texas is no joke. So my neighbor had come over, she had just heard the news, and we're standing outside, and she's just coming apart at the seams, like literally just sobbing and weeping over my son getting cancer. And I'm like, this feels inappropriate. And I think I was so irritated by her. I could understand, like, that's her stuff. It was so grossly inappropriate to me that it was easy to separate, that's yours, this is mine. And so as you go through life from here on out, especially if somebody else is having a negative response, negative low feeling to your situation, obviously, that's not necessarily a need for you to match that. Again, to Lisa's comment, and I like that, yeah, having to cope with their feelings. There's a lot of people in this world that don't have a high emotional intelligence. They just don't know how to handle things. In addition, many people tend to project how they would feel if it were them. I would caution us that we wouldn't do that as well. So if you start thinking of something, don't put yourself in that person's place. Right, yeah, it's Lisa, exactly. It's not a time to console others. I feel like I have a lot of side notes. I'm just, there's no such thing as a rabbit trail, right? It all matches. To that point, understand that it's absolutely okay and appropriate to say, you know what, this is not okay. I'm going to bow out of this conversation. I mean, really, there's a time when we have to cut things off like that. And so when we're feeling low, when we're having a negative feeling, something's come over us, especially if it doesn't feel reasonable for where we're at. Maybe you're, like I say, you're driving down the road, all of a sudden you just have this wash of grief or a wash of sadness. Make sure that you're asking the question, is it mine? I'm sorry, I have some notes here because I wrote so many different things. I thought, okay, I want to keep this together. If it is not yours, and you all know how to ask that, correct? And how to ask and listen for the answer.
No, I was just going to ask you that. How do I know? Thank you.
Yay, we're on the same page, Kathy. So if you were someone, so I think everyone in here is women of faith, but there are people who will watch later that may not have faith. So I'll speak to you right now for those who don't pray, don't know about that. When you ask, is this mine? Your soul, your subconscious will speak. Your body does not want to feel, or excuse me, your soul does not want to feel bad. It just doesn't. And so to Kathy's question and to my point here, if you're going down the road, you start to feel sad, asking even out loud, is this even mine? The first thing that comes to your mind is very likely the truth. Because if we give our subconscious even just a second to talk, it will. I know this from doing aroma freedom technique. We did that last week in our time together. Even just going back and forth one-on-one with people, figuring out what their calling is in life and these types of things. I like to catch people with the very first thing that comes to their mind. And so if you are someone who is a person of faith, pause and saying, okay, Lord, is this mine? Is this from you? Again, typically the first thing you feel or hear or think is the truth. The other side of that is this could be some enemy of your soul being broadcast and projected to you. This could be, quite frankly, an attack. Straight up, the enemy of our soul wants to steal, kill, and destroy from us. Remember, this is the month we're talking more about spiritual matters. And so when we have something that we realize, wait, why do I feel this way? There's no reason. It could be an emotional attack on us. Yeah, Lisa, intuition, gut feeling. On that, I've noticed in the last, I guess, year or so coaching people, I'm realizing that not everybody is introspective. This is not a bad thing. It just is what it is. There are some personalities that we talked about personalities a while back. There are some personalities that look more outside, take an outside view of life or their circumstances or whatever, and really don't take time to sit and think inwardly or dwell inwardly. Personalities like mine, and I don't know if any of you are that way, where I like to think and process. What am I feeling? What am I hearing? It's just personality. I have 5 children and they all 5, well, it's funny, I don't think any of them really, at least they don't express it. My littlest, she is a thinker and I can see, but she doesn't have the words to say what she's thinking quite yet. So when I walk them through, like, what are you hearing? What are you thinking? They have to really think. And to Kathy's point, they have to learn how to tap into that intuition, that gut feeling. And remember, we have talked a couple times in this summer prep about hearing the voice of God. This right here, did you guys know? Maybe I wrote about this. I meant to. If I didn't, I should. But the Hebrews would call this the Holy of Holies, your pineal gland. New Age calls it your third eye. This is where you hear. And if you can't hear, this is the time to do a decalcifying of your pineal gland. Because of fluoride, toxin, all of that, it gets gunked up. And really and truly, we can't hear our own intuition. We can't hear the voice of God. So that's something to perhaps dive into and say, she said I should be able to hear. I'm not hearing it. There's a lot of confusion there. That could be another thing. So going back to, is it yours? Entanglement could be an attack. If you remember, we talked about entanglement. It's basically 2 particles that are linked together, and no matter where they are in time and space, actually in space, and really time if you talk about DNA, but that's a deeper class for a whole nother day. No matter how far apart they are still connected. And this can happen really at any time in your life and in any way. It's not just a twin thing. Have you guys heard or known twins that they know something's going on with the other one, or families that are really, really close together? They just know. And a lot of times it can be a negative thing, but I know with twins, it can be both. That's that entanglement. But here's the thing. When we have this with other people, it can be old and it can happen at any age. For example, if you have kids in a classroom and they have a really emotionally charged event, it can be negative, it can be positive. But since we talk about emotional healing here, we'll keep it on the negative side. But let's say these kids experience something really hard. Let's say a class pet dying, right? That'd be so tragic if I was a teacher. They're all now connected emotionally through that. Is that making sense to those of you guys who are watching now? When they grow up, if somebody in their classroom has a negative situation, it may be that they will feel it. This is science. If you guys start looking up things about entanglements and energy and frequency, you understand that we are all so connected, particularly when you think we have one God and all these people birthed from him. The point of sharing that is understanding when you are having a negative emotion, asking, is this mine? Is so, so important. When you find out if that it's not, the answer is so simple. It's I reject that. That's not for me. You can rebuke it, but do it immediately. The moment you feel that. I probably harp on this, and I say harp because this is what most people, it's a little bit of a sticking point. But when we're watching television, whether it's TV shows, news, any of that, when we watch movies, understand that that is a hook. It's a type of entanglement. Why on earth would we ever cry at a sad movie? That's not happening to us. Also, did you know Hollywood does this where they'll put an animal in a movie to draw you in more emotionally? Did you also know that many times they'll cause some fear or terror or project some fear or terror about the animal, either having something tragic happen to the animal versus a human, because they know science has shown, studies have shown that people will become more emotionally invested and be more vulnerable when something negative happens to an animal versus happening to a human. And my kids and I have joked about that before, like, yeah, mom, if we see we watched Clifford, I don't know if you guys saw Clifford, and my kids are like, that was the saddest movie ever. Because the dog's mom was taken away or killed or something, and there was a chance that the dog would have some, they were like, this movie's horrible. Conversely, if they've ever watched a movie where, I don't know, a random character dies, they're like, yeah, whatever. I mean, it's kind of messed up. I like that share. I'm going to read it for those later. She says, I no longer agree with the spirit of fear my great-great-grandmother invited in. Right. That touches on a whole nother thing, that it is passed in our DNA. And I think we have shared that. So we have to reject that as not ours.
Jen, can you clarify the line between compassion and entanglement?
Ooh. Well, Kathy, I'm going to ask you, that's an excellent question. So I'm going to ask you, can you give me an example?
No, it's not happening to me, but I've experienced that in the past. And so I have incredible compassion for you. And I hate the phrase, I know how you feel, because I don't.
Right.
But I have felt the same way. I have experienced this, and I know the feelings I had with it. So I can have compassion for you because you are experiencing it.
You mean like if you see me and you know what I'm going through, and then you feel those emotions? Is that what you mean, Kathy?
No, that's not what I'm talking about. Okay, let's go back to animals.
Okay.
I've lost a dog, a cat, a horse.
Sure.
And when someone tells me stories that they've lost their dog, their cat, their horse, it touches a little bit of my pain. I have compassion for them. I have a friend right now, her horse is in the ICU with colic, impaction colic. And she's not going to spend, the horse is 27 years old. Right. She's not going to spend the money for the surgery. I have incredible compassion for her.
Sure.
Just at the thought of losing her horse. So the fact that that brings tears to my eyes because I know that pain, right? That doesn't mean I'm entangled. Right. That means I'm compassionate, I think.
No.
That's why I need clarification.
Yeah, no, and I love that. And this is why like I said, and Kathy, thank you for chiming in. I knew that this particular discussion would be a discussion because there's a lot of nuances into Kathy's point. So let's pause on the entanglement talk in that example with animals, because we were just talking about that, especially with a friend. there's a compassion that is from God himself. Jesus wept when he saw people weeping. He tells us to mourn with those who mourn and weep with those who weep, right? Rejoice with those who rejoice. There is a compassion that it is nothing to do with entanglement. It's a healthy component, aspect, however you want to say that. And so to Kathy's question, so what's the difference? I think the difference is, and somebody chime in if you think that, if you've had a different experience, the difference would be it is a burden that you're bearing because it's a God-given burden. You know, Kathy, it's funny that you mentioned, so today I was thinking on my walk, there was a time, and still, if I think about it enough, that I could not stop weeping over the city of Boston. It still pulls at my heartstrings. And I likened it to when my daughter was in the NICU, just that tearing away I felt when I had to leave her for 31 days. I was with her for 8 hours a day, and then I had other children to be with. But it was that pulling away, and I would cry when I didn't see her. And I felt the same way for these people. They were so lost, emotionally and spiritually. And so there's that burden. It wasn't entanglement. It's a drive that the Lord gave me. And with animals, you've experienced this. You understand how this person is feeling to some extent. Obviously, like you said, everybody's thing is different. But you understand grief, you understand that pain, there's that compassion. So now we get into a discussion of, I guess, good entanglement, in that it's from the Lord and it would actually cause us to pray. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you. And that's exactly what it's doing.
Good.
You
Good.
know? I mean,
Yeah.
I am praying hard for her.
Yeah. And
For
that
her,
is
not for the horse, for her.
yes, for sure. For sure. And that right there, and I'm so grateful you brought that up again, because this is when we have to discern, is this ours? And being, is it ours? The Holy Spirit can say, yeah, I gave it to you. And so here's some prayer strategies to pray for your friend, to pray for like someone like me who lost, my husband, and now I'm raising 5 kids. That's hard. God-given burden is compassion. Man-given burden is entanglement. Man, you're so good with the words, Sherry. See, so good. That's perfect. I'm going to say it again. God-given burden is compassion, and man-given burden is entanglement. And the challenge, I guess, comes now when we discern which is which. So we ask the question, is this mine? And maybe we're not sure. Is this from you, Lord? Is this a time to pray? I've read way too many stories, especially of moms who have children in the military, where all of a sudden they just feel this intense feeling to drop to their knees and pray, right? And when they go back, they learn that right at that exact same time or right before, their kid was either getting in some shenanigans or come on enemy fire. Who knows? Listening to those feelings of burden and compassion, or whichever, however it plays out, is really a call for action. It's a call to step in. In my situation, as I shared a year ago when we went to that Young Living event, for me, I felt it was inappropriate because I hadn't been upset. You could look at me. I mean, I had makeup on. I thought I looked pretty good at that point. So somebody coming and weeping on me or at me was a form of that entanglement. Probably, so God-given burden, maybe it was at the time because they were feeling what I was feeling, but I wasn't feeling that way right at that moment, if that makes sense. So when we have, so
I was at that event and you did look good. And
Thank you.
I praised God for that. Yeah, you hugged me.
Yeah. And you didn't cry all over me.
No, I was actually joyful because you look so good.
Well,
and I knew there was no, you weren't pretending anything. This was God.
Yeah.
This is God showing through Jen. So
for sure. Thank you for saying that. And those are the things, and there are moments where the tears do come and it gets tricky. But at that moment, yes. So thank you for saying. When we have these feelings, whether it's ours. No, you know what? Let me pause. If it's not ours and it's an attack, obviously we can reject it, rebuke it, whatever we need to do, say, no, that's not mine. The second thing, so this is where I want to bring in our transformation. How many of you guys have transformation that you're watching now? You do have, okay. Lisa, if it's good, if you guys think, okay, Kathy has it. So if you guys have it, go ahead and use it. If you don't have transformation, again, another combo. If somebody can remind me who, I want to give credit to who credit's due, but I long time ago heard about using thieves and digize. And I'm going to tell you what, if you need an oil that's just going to flip your mind and help just shake you out of whatever's going on, that little pair is phenomenal. So you breathe in your transformation and start thinking back to what you had been thinking before the attack came, what you had been thinking before this entanglement started occurring, transforming your mind. Deb, I'm going to go ahead and read this because I want other people to hear. This is phenomenal. She says, I had an experience like that when my son was in Iraq. I had no idea why, but I suddenly felt an ice cold feeling come over me and felt the need to pray for my son and his guys. I found out later my son was in a tunnel underground and just inches away from an exploded bomb. That's wild. Those are burdens. Definitely, definitely. So we breathe in our oil and it brings us back. It brings us back to the right space. On the flip side of it, to Deb's example, there have been times where again, this is just my experience. I've come across something like that and I start to what if myself to near death. What if I hadn't prayed? What if this? And you start spiraling. And that can be really hard. You've had something hard, like with my husband. I can't tell you the number of times I have gone back in time and thought, what if I had paid better attention? What if, and you start doing this and it's right, Lisa, it doesn't serve anybody, does you no good. Does you no good. I'm sure I had a burden for my husband and I just ignored it because we don't get sick. My goodness, we're vegan marathon runners for heaven's sakes. What the heck? So using an oil like transformation, you breathe it in, you start speaking truth out, start looking to the future. Another oil, I don't have it with me, otherwise I don't know why you guys have to see the bottle. I'm so old school. Here, look at the bottle, as if you guys cannot go and look at the website all by yourself, right? Thank you. Like, oh, look, show and tell. I guess I secretly want to be Vanna. But into the future. Thank you, Lisa. Beautiful. Into the future is such a phenomenal oil to help draw you to not only out of the past, into the present, and then into the future, so that you can start looking forward. So many times we cannot get into the present and even into our next step of our destiny in our life because we're so back here. We're so married to the past, whether it's a negative thing and a positive thing, a good, a bad, indifferent, doesn't matter. We have to always keep moving forward. It's what our God wants for us. Present time. Yeah, that's such a good one too. That's a good one. So we use transformation to help break that cycle, right? It breaks the emotional loop cycle. So powerful. Emotion code. Yep. And that was the oil use. That's a good one, Lisa. Excellent. Now the other side of it, so I'll touch on this and then we can chat a little bit more about it, but I think this will be good for us for now. But talking about trauma life, we all have used trauma life. I'm assuming if you've sat with me for a few minutes, you've heard me say, please get trauma life, please add that to it, or please get it with your points. It's a really great oil. And yeah, trauma life, good, Deb. It's one of those oils for me that I just absolutely love and use all the time. All the time. In fact, I have one in my purse. I have one here at my desk. I have it in my bathroom. I've got several bottles. Not because I'm a hoarder, but just because I want to hit it off with the past. Now, let's use the example of the compassion. We'll talk about that. And it is a burden that you're bearing for someone else. please use Trauma Life while you're doing that. Because the enemy of our soul loves nothing more into adding burden where it does not need to be burdened. Many times when I pray for somebody and I feel even tears will come, it's like you cry on their behalf. I don't know if anybody else does that. It's really weird because I think that the Lord gives us like a little, just a little bit of a taste of what they might be feeling. So you have those weepy moments, but using Trauma Life will help remove anything that is not yours. There still can be that line where we start to feel too much, and then we can almost like the trauma becomes ours. We don't want it to stick on our body. That was what I was looking for. Oh, yeah. Okay, I hadn't heard him say that, Kathy. So she says, Dr. Perkis said last night that Trauma Life can be replaced, can replace the memory release blend. I've actually used it for that. And I didn't know, I mean, I'm glad to hear that he said you could use it. I've used it for that when I can't get any kind of movement in my aroma freedom technique on myself. So if you're feeling maybe a little bit stuck or just even in place of it, I guess, is that, Kathy, do you want to elaborate, or is that pretty much all he said?
No, he just said that if people don't have all of those oils, that he knows Trauma Life is expensive, but it has so many great uses that if they have Trauma Life, they could use that.
Awesome. Thank you. So as we talk about Trauma Life, I have a dear friend his mom had passed away recently. And so he texted me the other day, he said, okay, how do we use this? I'm sending some to my dad, and then I need it for myself. And I just over text, and we did this last week, so I'll remind you guys again. I said, well, what's the emotion that you're feeling? And it took him a while, and he came back with the emotion. I said, and where are you feeling that? And he shared. I said, then apply it there. Obviously, put the Trauma Life over your forehead, over your neck, over your heart. But then wherever you hear the emotion, because you're going through something that most people would describe as grief, that may not be the emotion you're feeling. In this kid's case, it was empty. And then he says, that's not an emotion. I said, stop judging it. If that's what you thought of, that's the emotion. Yeah, exactly. And that is, I mean, it can be a noun, or it can be a verb, it can be it can be a lot of things. But apply your Trauma Life where you're feeling it. Trauma Life is definitely something that we all need in our time in our world. If you look through Facebook, you guys, if you look on any social media, if you watch any amount of TV or hear any news, please use your Trauma Life often. This will help break off any kind of entanglement that's not yours. It'll help soothe your own wounds and despairing thoughts as you see things that are happening. I've heard of things, you guys, that have happened in our world in the last week, and I always think I can't be surprised. I grew up in California. I grew up military. I lived in Boston. You can't shock me. Yeah, you can. You really can. It turns out I've been shocked this week. I'm like, what is wrong with people? So I constantly use Trauma Life just on my brainstem so that I don't keep it with me. Yes, yellow personalities need lots of Trauma Life, definitely. I think that in the 4 personalities that I mentioned a few weeks back, I believe that's the phlegmatic personality. I think, don't quote me. Where there's choleric, sanguine, melancholy, and then it's melancholies. Yeah, okay. See, I'm glad you adjusted that, because I'm not either one of those. So I'm always like, which one is that? You know how you kind of get a little self-absorbed, you only know what you know. Using Trauma Life is so important. And I would encourage you that share oils, please have your people start using Trauma Life. I have friends who ordered it years ago because I shared, and then every time I talk about it, it's, oh, I haven't used it yet. Oh my gosh, why? I don't know about you guys. When I get a new oil, I just crack it open right away. It's just what I do because I need it, right? Okay. So
wait, before you move on, Jen, are you saying, you said you use Trauma Life all the time as you need it, right? You don't use it it's not a part of your daily program. It's like, I'm going to put my trauma life on today because something's going to happen.
Right. No, gosh, no.
Okay.
Yes.
I mean, we all know something's going to happen. It's like,
I mean, you walk outside, it's like, oh, okay. No, that's a good distinction. I do have it with me just in case. But no, I don't put it on as a routine. It is an as needed basis. And yeah, for me, you know, as just as you guys know my story right now, there's things that can come up that I think, okay, I need to use that. It's interesting. So watching some of my kids when they start to have tears, I'll use my trauma life, even though I tell them to, but they're not always, it's like, okay, I'm really with the oils again. You know, sometimes you don't want someone throwing an oil at you when you're just knee deep in the thick of sad. And so I use it so that they smell it. Even watching your children be sad is hard. So yeah. Okay. That is pretty much what I had for us tonight, as far as asking if it's not, you know, if it's yours, if it's not yours. If anybody has any thoughts, ideas, Lisa's emphatically shaking her head. Take it away, Lisa.
What Deb just wrote, white angelica on before going out the door in today's world. I put that is like a standard for me. It's like slap that. I mean, Gary's Great Day Protocol. Oh, that, I mean, but I slap white angelica on all the time.
That's a good point. You know, that is to Kathy's question earlier, that is a daily for me. I mean, you guys can share. I put it on my crown, on my head. I put it over my heart. I sometimes put it on my shoulders. How do you all use it? Deb, you say you do it down like that?
And that's my Lindsay oil. So
the white angelica, was that one she liked?
No, Lindsay never smelled it. You heard me when I was in Dallas, when that first February that Tasha told me to start using joy over my heart and to use white angelica. And so I had gotten it and I opened the white angelica, and that was before it was reformulated. That was like the very last time before it still had the rosewood in it. And when I opened that oil, it was like, whoa, that was Lindsay. It smelled just like she had walked in the room.
Wow. I don't think was that when you spoke a little bit ago?
Up on the panel. Yes. Yes. Literally. It was just, that was my daughter. So there's, you know, people on my team that know that we call that Lindsay's oil. We don't call it white angelica. We call it Lindsay's oil.
Oh, that's awesome.
Lindsay's oil.
I love that. So Sherry, you put it over your kidneys. Could you share why, if you don't mind?
Because you said to.
Oh, that's good. Because she did. She told us that the kidneys were our real heart.
Yeah.
That's the truth.
And so that's where I always put that, and I'll put release
for
door.
We listen to you.
I will research and study, and then I know I have said joy over the kidneys and, you know, energy, all that, but yeah, white angelica, yay me. I'm so glad I said that.
the kidneys in Chinese medicine, the kidneys are the paired organ to the heart. Okay.
Yes.
The heart is the fire organ and the kidneys are the water organ. So the water organ cools the heart organ.
Yes.
It doesn't put it out. Okay. It cools it.
It cools it.
Kathy, will you put that in the chat, please?
Yes.
So I don't mess it up, if you don't mind, and that way I can copy it and throw it in there. That would be great, because that makes total sense now. Total.
It's interesting, since you talked about the kidneys, I have been doing a study on kidneys and adrenals on a spiritual and emotional level. I'm not at the point where I can speak totally intelligently about it, but I have been fascinated by these little guys since I learned in scripture, whatever person decided to translate it, interestingly, they translate it to the mind or the heart, when in Hebrew it's either reins or kidneys. So I found that interesting, and I started studying a little bit more, and I came across a teaching about blessing your kidneys. Now that might just sound weird, but blessing your body, which is a whole nother topic. I'll talk about it in Healing Haven at some point. coming up, because so many times, think about like weight management or any of that, we don't bless our body. We don't bless that. And the kidneys, they actually will be judged by God. And that's in Jeremiah something. Again, I just want to, if you guys want to do a little study, I thought that was interesting to think, this little obscure organ has almost like a mind of its own, which then I felt better about them translating the word into mind, because if this is how they found it in Hebrew, right? And maybe in the context, and to Kathy's point, the heart and the kidneys being together in Chinese medicine, I thought, okay, I feel more well-rounded about it. I'm on to something. All of that to say is I really believe, I can't say I know for sure, but I really believe that our kidneys are the key to some exceptional emotional health. And then of course, subsequently physical, or vice versa. So.
Well, there's also the concept that fear lives in the kidneys. And aren't there 365 verses that mention fear in the Bible? Isn't fear one of the most used words in the Bible? So when you put all this together, it makes sense.
Yeah. And thank you for that piece, Kathy, because that's something I hadn't pieced together. So it's,
I think it's do not fear.
The do not fear is 365 times. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. Okay. Any other comments or thoughts and ideas about anything we've said tonight?
No, but I have a question for when you turn the recording off.
You bet. On that note, we'll see you next week.